We've tried all of the different chemotherapies that we have in New Zealand. And that's when she said, basically, I think we should talk about what do you want to do with the time you have left in your life. Like it was like, shit, are we having this conversation? And we went into the doctor. That's when we got this diagnosis, terminal cancer. We have to stop the treatment. It's all gone horribly wrong. By the time we got out, the next morning, Mike had sent back a message going, I've talked to a few people. One of them wants to talk to you today. And that person happened to be a researcher and a cancer researcher on the type of cancer I had with a treatment that we don't have in New Zealand. And he thought I could be a candidate for the trial.
Went over there and you come back.
Yeah.
And it works.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that mindset.
It usually gets a round of applause, but okay. But then, at the same time, my brother-in-law and a mate of mine from uni and stuff, we decided we would set up this tech company. Because again, this is 1994, 95. And so he said, we should go to these power companies and sell them some software to help them. And so we did. We didn't have the software, by the way. We had to write it. But it worked incredibly. And in fact, it got really, really successful.
But do you have you had survivor's guilt?
This week on Between Two Beers, we talk to David Downs. This episode is a little bit different as it was filmed in front of a live audience at the Icehouse. There's about 150 in the room, and David is the perfect guest for our first ever recorded live pod. David is a former comedian, he's a business owner, he's the CEO of New Zealand Story and the chairman of the Icehouse with a ridiculous business CV, and he's also a terminal cancer survivor. And we got all of his story in this epic chat. The energy in the room was great, and this is something we're keen to do a lot more of in future. Huge thanks to the team at the Icehouse for helping us put this on. We had a great night and are super excited to share it with you. This episode is brought to you by the TAB. Got a hunch? Download the new app today and get your bet on. Enjoy. David Downs.
Kia ora kōrua.
Welcome to Between Two Beers Live.
This is fantastic, apart from the distinct lack of a beer or any sort of drink that I've got. But apart from that, it's very good.
This is like a home game for you, isn't it? We're playing away.
Wow.
You got the crowd trained?
Oh, I don't know about that. For those of you who don't know, hi, I'm David. It's very nice to meet you all.
So pretend they're not here. Pretend they're not here and it's just us. This is a podcast. Pretend they're not here.
Just a normal night.
Don't break the
of Monday
wall.
night. Okay,
yeah, that's it.
So for those that haven't listened to the podcast, the way we normally go about things is we contact as many people we know in our guest's world. And we often put an intro in post, it's called, after the recording. But today we're going to do it a bit differently because we're live. So we've got quite an eclectic introduction. And the hard thing for you, David, is you're just going to have to sit there and take it. We've also put one blatantly false thing in here. So see if you can figure out what it is, okay? So good luck. So here's your introduction. David Downs is a great man.
How are we going so far?
I'll take it.
David falls asleep every night at 9 p.m, whether you want him to or not. Very rude when it's in the middle of a conversation. His wife thinks he's faking it half the time. He's terrible at finding container lids, and this has been described as his downfall. That's honestly the worst thing we could find about you. You clearly have a lot of blackmail evidence on everyone we talk to.
All right, let me go for my list. Here we go. He's not particularly good at handiwork around the house with unfinished jobs in each room, though he does have 3 kids, so he gets things done in the bedroom. Am I right? Huh?
There's been no complaints.
Yeah, good. He's a man of big ambition. His life goal is to complete the 8 great walks, but so far he's only done 1. Promised that he will do the others after he's finished fixing the kitchen cabinet. So, never.
I'm trying to spot they're all lies so far. I don't know what you're doing.
He's been called the most networked man in New Zealand, so if you owe him money, he'll be able to find you. He's the half-brother of the Honourable Christopher Luxon, which I think means he gets to be the Deputy Prime Minister after Seymour or Peters has had to go. Is that right?
I am often mistaken for our fine Prime Minister, yes.
David is a published author. He's made a documentary. He founded the comedy bar at the Classic at age 25. He's a marriage celebrant. It was a semi-finalist for the New Zealander of the Year in 2020 and is a university dropout. So it goes without saying that he spent most of his life in a time before we knew how to diagnose ADHD. Is that right?
Yeah, explains the container lids. Okay. I am going to try and summarise. Actually, I'm not going to do that. Your work history and your current roles actually make us quite sick. So this is the part of the podcast for those that listen where Steve paints a picture of what you've done. So go ahead and paint that picture for us, Steve.
So he started as the CEO of Comedy Fest in 1992. And to quote his LinkedIn page, let's be honest, I had no idea what I was doing.
That's like half-brother Chris, isn't it, running the country? That's what he said as well.
Nice, man. That one landed. But any stand-up comedian who can answer an email is automatically the most qualified leader in the room. 3 years later, he founded and became CEO of Eureka Software Development, all self-taught. Then the regional director of Microsoft, based in Singapore. He became the GM of New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, co-founder and CEO of SOS Business, task force lead at the Ministry of Business, advisory board member at the Department of Internal Affairs. He's currently the CEO of New Zealand Story, chairman of both the Icehouse and Consult Recruitment, and honestly, David, it feels like a lot.
Had that cancer thing as well, didn't he?
How could I forget? Yes, he also beat a terminal cancer diagnosis. He was given a 5% chance of surviving more than a year, and spoiler alert, he's still here.
Thank you very much. Mind you, I think that year might be up tonight, so I hope I can do it.
Now, we've heard you've got 25 presentations this month alone. We've got you for 90 minutes, unless you fall asleep before we finish.
That's right, 9 p.m. I fall asleep, yep.
So look, ladies and gentlemen, we've done our best to kind of set the scene. One more round of applause for the incredible David Downs.
Thank you.
Do you want to let
See,
them know?
now I'm absolutely bricking myself because you've obviously done quite a bit of research here.
Yeah. Do you want to let them know what the lie was?
I've done 2 of the Great Walks, not one. And I can find container lids if I choose to find them, Catherine.
There'll be some out there thinking, I didn't know he was Luxon's half-brother. All right, let's get into it. I want to sort of pick apart some of those some of those nuggets in there, I'll call them. The line about 25 presentations in May. Yeah. Is that legit?
Yeah, including tomorrow, we've got a big event. But no, I am often called upon to do like business presentations in my day job at New Zealand Story, but then also the cancer journey that I went on means that I actually do a lot of speaking about cancer and resilience and personal mindsets and that sort of stuff. And yeah, random other things that just get thrown in as well.
So you're not just rolling out the same one 25 times.
No, it often
on
is.
autopilot.
I often turn up and go, "Who am I? Like, what am I? Who am I today? Like, who do I have to be now?" Because sometimes you're in a different context than normal. So yeah, sometimes it's the cancer story, and you find yourself in the middle of a group of patients, and I'm talking about what it's like to be a patient, and that empathy that you feel. And then other times, like last week, I had the Saudi Arabian delegation come to New Zealand. They want to learn all about New Zealand, so that was like, oh, not the presentation I would normally give. Yeah,
I'm always fascinated when we talk to busy people that have got a lot on, like what the nuts and bolts look like behind the scenes. And I was interested to hear that you prioritize sleep.
Yeah.
Because that surprised me. I thought you must be a few hours a night guy. But can you tell us about why you prioritize sleep?
Oh, hugely. 8 hours a night, every night, like religiously. I pray just before I go to sleep. No, I mean, to me, it's such an important thing is that the reason I can work really hard and I enjoy working hard is because I do sleep a lot. I think it's one of the most important things we do. Lately, I've been reading all these amazing... I'm getting to the age where you read books about longevity. So I've been reading books about longevity. There's some good ones. And sleep is probably the number one thing you can do and for your mental health, for your physical health. It lets your body reset, etc., etc. So no, I literally do fall asleep. Maybe not 9 o'clock. That's a bit rude, but 9:30.
I heard it was just because you had a great EA, Amy.
And I have a great EA. Yes, that's the other thing. So great EA called Amy. I'm diligent about keeping track of the things I commit to doing. So I've got a task list that I'm always making sure I'm keeping up on, and then sleep. Yeah, get good people around you. That's probably the first thing, though.
So I spoke to your wife, Catherine, in the prep for this, and I sort of said, do you know, like he's got so much going on, do you know what he's doing on day to day? And she's like, I gave up knowing what he was doing a long time ago. She told us a story that I'm hoping you can expand on, that one time when you were living in Singapore, she asked you to get some milk on the way home, and you replied, that might be a bit tricky, hon, I'm actually in Jakarta.
It's a very true story. And then she went on to say, I thought I saw you this morning. And I went, nah, I was in Ho Chi Minh City this morning.
That was Chris Luxon.
I think when she closes her eyes, she sees Chris Luxon. Yeah, that's exactly right. But I know that was funny. That was a few years ago. We were living in Singapore, and I had this job. Microsoft had brought me up to Singapore to do this really cool job, like regional director. And when I got the job, I said to them, do I have to travel much? And it's like, no, just like a couple of days a month. It's all fine. You know, you live in Singapore, you look after all these other countries, but you just only have to travel once or twice a month. Got there, and of course, everything's on fire in Asia. Like, there was corruption going on in one place. There were people who had left. The business wasn't doing well. There was a customer who was grumpy. So I ended up having to travel basically 5 days a week out of Singapore. So yeah, it literally was one day when that's when we realised it had gone on a bit long. When Catherine said, "Can you get the milk on the way home?" I was like, no, I'm in another country. Sorry.
You've got one of these lives where when we're sort of framing what we're going to talk about, it's like, well, where do you start? There's so much to cover. But I actually want to dig into the early years, because there may be some that are surprised to learn that your first professional job was as a comedian. And I'm really interested in digging into the sort of like late teenage, early 20 years of how that started and where it led to.
Clearly I was a bit shit at it, otherwise I'd still be doing it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had the golden experience. I went to university, went to school, obviously went to university, discovered pretty quickly that I didn't really enjoy university. I was only there for like the first few weeks, and I had been the dux of my school. Ooh.
Whoa.
Yeah, but there were literally 6 kids in year 13 or, 7th form. So it was a pretty low bar. I was the tallest dwarf, basically. And basically, that meant that, when I got to university, I was well out of my league. I'd signed up to do mathematics. That was a stupid thing to do, but I thought it sounded brainy. I thought it would get me chicks. Didn't. No. Strange that. But anyway, but then I fell in with a good crowd, which is that I kind of found my tribe at university. I went to signed up for the thing called a capping review, and this was at Massey University, 1989. And there was all this kind of comedy stuff going on, and none of us really knew what we were doing, but I fell in with a good crowd, like people like John Bridges, who's a mate of mine, Jeremy Corbett, and Nigel Corbett, his brother, and a whole lot of other really cool people. And that led to basically my first job. Yeah, I was offered this job, dropped out of university, rest is history.
I asked John Bridges what a capping review was, and I quote, he said, "Nerds who wrote sketches instead of playing rugby and sinking piss."
That's a pretty accurate description. Yeah. But it's just that's the beautiful thing when you find your tribe. Like I was born in Wanganui in New Zealand here to two Irish parents. But it wasn't until I really got to university that I found a group of people that were more like me, that storytellers, joke tellers, and just found this great experience, and people like John and others. And it was a great thing to go and put on these shows, write this comedy stuff. We were pretty ropey, to be fair. It wasn't great, but it was practice, and it's like anything you do, you have to start somewhere and get better at it.
Those names, Jeremy Corbett, John Bridges, David Downs, like exceptionally successful people.
Palmerston North, my friend.
Did you realise at the time you had a special group?
No. We were literally guys that couldn't get girlfriends, I think. It was... it's many a true word. No, it was... we didn't know. We're looking back now, though, it was a pretty special place. Stephen Joyce is another one who's now on the board here of the Icehouse with me. Stephen was just a couple of years earlier than me. We had Fred Dagg had been to our university. So it was a really quite interesting group of people that just sort of landed in university. And as I say, this is a time when you find yourself, you kind of explore who you are, do stupid things. Luckily, no camera phones back then. We got away with a lot.
So you say that you weren't very good, but you get a phone call out of the blue one day, right?
Yeah.
Tell us what happens.
Literally. I mean, it's one of 2 times in my life that, I look back on and go, that was a really pivotal moment. Because we were just in these shows. It was like university lecture hall, half full, mainly of our friends and reluctant other people. And we were doing basically sketch comedy. We'd written all these sketches. We were very informed by, the shows from the British comedy style. And one day, unbeknownst to us, a TV director came along. This is in 1989 or 90 maybe. And this TV director had sat in our show and watched the show. And we didn't know this. And the next day, literally, I was at home, and I got this call from this random person saying, my name's Dave. I've got this TV production company. We're about to put on New Zealand's 3rd TV channel. This is back in the days when we only had 2 TV channels. Very elegantly called TV1 and TV2. They were going to start a new one. Guess what they called it? Anyway, they were starting a new one, and he wanted to do a comedy show. And he asked me and a couple of the other guys that were in the show, including John, if we would come to Wellington and be on the show. So it was like this golden opportunity that we just couldn't turn down, much to my parents' disgust.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah.
Dropping out of university to follow a comedy dream. What did they think, and how did that
Every
conversation
parent's dream when their son comes home and says, you know how you thought I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer, but actually I'm going to drop out and become a comedian on television. I was literally going to be the first person in the entirety of my family's genealogy. If you could go back thousands of years in both of my parents, no one's ever been to university. And I was the first one, and so like all hopes were pinned upon me, and then I dashed them by going off and doing stupid shit on TV.
Yeah, but to dig in a little bit, like seriously, was it difficult going against what your parents wanted you to do?
It was brave. I don't know if it was difficult. I mean, my parents are very supportive of it, I think. It took Dad a bit of time to get over it, but Mum was very supportive because they realised that it was following your passion, And I think that's the key thing is any parent, when they see their child, and I can say this now as a parent of children of sort of that age, when you see your child really find the thing that they love and are good at or could be good at, you're all in, aren't you? And if it wasn't the thing you thought they were going to do, you didn't, you wanted them to be a lawyer, but they're not going to. They're going to go and do something else. But you'll be behind them. And I think most parents would feel like that. That's certainly what I felt.
You talk about the idea of all in. Was it a case for you and your friends of being one in, all in? Was it dependent on the rest of the gang following? Or were you
They offered three of us, I think, jobs, and then a couple of others writing jobs. So it was pretty much, it was my group. We were all kind of like connected together. John and I, in particular, we had these characters that we developed on stage, which they kind of put in the TV show. They were these skateboarding guys, and we were young at the time, and so we had these two characters. So that became part of the show. It was a show called Away Laughing, by the way. So
do you remember that? Other than me?
Away Laughing? No, you're all too young. Anyway, and it launched on the first day that TV3 started in New Zealand. It was like the news, a current affairs show, and then us. And it was like this, big news in New Zealand that there was now a third TV channel. No one could find it on the dial. All the old people still left their stuff on TV1, but, we were there.
One of the things that grabbed me in the research to this is the start of your business journey. Because I don't know if people will know that you were the founder of The Classic. Like you decided at mid-20s to take on this business venture.
Yeah.
And then shortly afterwards you had another business. But I really want to dig into this period of your life because there'll be a lot of people here that are like us, early into their business experience. But what was it like for you and what lessons did you learn across that
I don't
period?
know if I decided, you'd use that word decided. I'm a bit like you fellas, accidental business owner, not really knowing what you were doing. Well, it's partly why I have such a huge empathy for small and medium businesses. But yeah, we were stand-up comedians. So fast forwarding a bit, we'd done the TV thing. It was all good. We came to Auckland, and we started doing stand-up comedy. In my daytime, I was still writing for TV. I was a writer, and then in the evenings we would do stand-up gigs in front of a concrete wall. It was like it's a traditional thing. And we discovered that we were standing in other people's bars, including the Windsor Castle Tavern, which is not far from where we are now. And we would do our stand-up. And at the end of the night, and we, by the way, had hired the chairs. We'd put them in the room. Catherine, my wife there, then girlfriend, would be at the thing taking the tickets. At the end of the night, we'd clean up all the chairs. We'd split the takings between everyone, and we might get $20 each. And we were watching the guy in the corner, the bar owner, printing money, like just taking money hand over fist. And we're going, what mugs are we? In a gold mine, be the person selling the shovels, So we were thinking, okay, we've got to get out of being the entertainment and actually own the venue that the entertainment is in. How hard could that be?
People who are at the start of their business journey often get into the hard work.
Yeah.
You guys really got into the hard work when you took over the venue, right? Because what was the venue before it became a comedy club?
You know a little bit more than most people. Well, it was a porn cinema.
I know it very well.
Your jacket's not long enough for that. Literally, we decided we got a bunch of comedians. None of us knew what the hell we were doing. We found this venue on Queen Street it was called The Classic, and it used to years ago play classic movies like Hollywood classics. And over the years, it had become a little bit more down market. They started playing porn. It was literally porn. This is in the days before, free porn on the internet, Dodgy sailors coming off the boats would wander up Queen Street, literally with their sort of anoraks on, and sidle into this place and believe it or not, watch a porn movie surrounded
really had to
by
work for it
other
in those days.
dodgy blokes. It's not a great mental image. Anyway, we found this place was sort of not doing that well, and they were on a month-by-month lease with the council. And so we went to the council, cheeky buggers that we were. Like, I was 24, 25, a couple of the other guys there, and we convinced the council to kick them out, sorry to the people that got kicked out, and let us take over the lease. And it's a 4-story building, so I don't know if you know, it's on Queen Street. There's the ground level on Queen Street is now the classic. There's a upstairs story, and there's actually 2 stories downstairs, around the back. And they gave us access to the bottom 2 stories about 3 months before the top 2 stories, because it's just the way the leases worked out. So, and we set up our office in the floors underneath the porn cinema. And it was the most hilarious time of our life, because we're all like, we didn't know what we're doing. You know, we'd borrowed some computers and stuff, hired a couple of people, including some poor young administrator woman, and you know, she's amazing. Ursula, if you're listening to this, you were amazing. Anyway, and I remember just so vividly sitting there, and you'd be sitting working away, and then at 11 o'clock, the movie started. And it was through a very thin wooden floor just above our head. And we'd be sitting there, like, pissing ourselves trying to do our work while there's grunting and moaning and all sorts of shit going on upstairs. It was crazy.
What did you do with the floor when you got up to the next year? How did you deal with the refit?
It was one of the funniest things. We walk, the day we get the actual keys for that floor, we walk in there, and it was just toxic. You know, like, as you can imagine, years of abuse. Put it that way, self-abuse mainly. And we just had to completely gut the entire place. The worst was, of course, the toilets. Oh my God, we're getting a bit deep here, aren't we?
No, go on.
We're all about the detail. We're all about the detail.
And the problem was, because we didn't have much money, because we'd completely undercapitalised. We had no idea how much it would actually take to redo the cinema. So we didn't really have the money. We had taken, as I say, the possession of the bottom 2 floors, and we had spent quite a bit of our money on the bottom 2 floors that no one would ever see. And then when we got to the top 2 floors, like, we didn't actually have much money. So we ended up having to, like, do it all on the cheap. Catherine made the tablecloths. She was sewing the curtains. All of us had to go in there and, like, you know, clean out the toilets. It was crazy, but it was also, like, exhilarating.
I want to fact check something, because like me, out of your group of friends that had started this business, were you the only one that could use Excel, therefore became the CFO?
This is it. Accidental CFO. Because I'd studied mathematics, and then when I did maths in my first year, they made us use, like, Excel. And then when we got to, like, setting up the cinema, and none of us knew much about anything. It's definitely not about business. There was one guy who knew how to run a bar, but that mainly meant he knew how to buy the equipment to run a bar. He didn't, you know, he loved that.
Beers?
Yeah, and buy the beers. And so I ended up being the CFO. And then we decided we needed more money, so we went out to friends, family, fools, you know, the whole normal. Raised, well, we thought at the time was an enormous amount of money, like $250,000. From lots of people, let's you know, generously call them investors. They didn't realise they were donors. Great apologies to anyone of them that are listening, but including, like, Jeremy and some of the comedians, Mark Wright, and then Catherine's mum, you know, her uncle. It was really pretty low key. But I was the one that we looked after that money, and I guess that was a huge business lesson. Like, the next. I think I was involved for like 5 years, and those years were like an MBA on steroids. You know, like, none of us. I hadn't completed my degree, by the way. I dropped out, hadn't studied business, but boy, oh boy, you get the University of Life teaching you an MBA. When you stand, I remember vividly standing outside the Classic at like 4 o'clock on a Friday. We hadn't paid our bills because we were so, you know, we were dodgy as hell, and we didn't have any money, and we'd undercapitalised. And the guys from Lion were standing there with all of the drinks for the weekend and saying, the boss said, we can't deliver this unless you pay last week's bill. And it's like, oh shit. And calling anyone who's got any room on their credit card. Any of you guys got any room? And Catherine and I, for the first few years, actually underwrote the entire operation on our property. We're the only ones who had property. And that was another accident of life, by the way, a whole nother thing. But so we were like underpinning all the loans, underpinning all the debt. It was horrifically stressful, but also exhilarating. And it makes you, as I say, it makes me have huge empathy for anyone running a business and the importance of cash flow, understanding your numbers, understanding your customers, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, okay, help me make sense of something, because hugely stressful, mid-20s, you're running this business, but then a few years later, and I'm not sure the timelines, you set up a tech company called Eureka.
Same time.
Same time.
Yeah, same
And so
time.
you're running two businesses mid-20.
Yeah.
And Eureka is wildly successful, right?
Yeah.
Like this one takes off.
They were kind of they were counter-cyclical. So the classic was successful from an artistic sense. It's not from a financial sense, but then at the same time, my brother-in-law and a mate of mine from uni and stuff, we decided we would set up this tech company because again, this is 1994, 95. And there was this thing called the internet that had just come along, and we were all looking at it going, there's something in this, eh? Like, there could be something in this. And we set up this little tech company. My mate was a computer programmer. I'd done enough that I could kind of muddle my way through. And we started working with big corporates. At that time, this is going to sound really nerdy, but the New Zealand power electricity system got deregulated, and they changed the whole way the power system worked and blah, blah, blah. And Nigel knew a lot about that. And so he said, we should go to these power companies and sell them some software to help them. And so we did. We didn't have the software, by the way. We had to write it. But it worked incredibly. And it got really, really successful. So that business I was running that. I was CEO of that one at the same time as the Classic. And other people were helping with the Classics. It was great. But the two things were just so opposite to each other. One is a hospitality, cash flow poor, really day-to-day business, and the other one is just having these massive growth problems, trying to find enough people to fill the contracts to be able to develop the stuff that we'd promised people we could give them. Yeah, it was stressful.
You speak about that phone call that you got at uni as being a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
Was burning the candle at both ends and running on fumes another one of those pivotal moments, now with the benefit of hindsight?
It was a formative moment in terms of, as I say, like I look back now and the lessons I learned from A, being a comedian, and then B, running two businesses at the same time are so critical. They're ingrained in me now. I look around, fast forward 35 years now, and I look around at sometimes at what the government does, and I just go, it's too slow. These businesses cannot wait. When you're running a small or medium business, you need help now, or you need something now. You can't hang around for some lots of policy things. And it was that lesson that you learn about cash flow and the importance of, like, as I say, listening to customers and then reacting fast. Yeah, it was formative, definitely.
I'm curious about the crossover between comedy and business.
Yeah.
What are the main things that you take from one to the other?
Sure, Jesus, that's a ChatGPT question. Comedy is a business like any other business. When we set it up, we had a vision, we had a purpose, which was amazing. So we took it seriously. We had a business plan that people fell for. We set it up in a way that we really wanted to be clear on what we achieved, and it wasn't a financial achievement. It was about we wanted to create a new comedy industry in New Zealand. And it's interesting now, and I'm not claiming credit for it because so many people did it, but I think we actually have achieved that purpose. Like, there is now an industry. There's dozens of people who make their money in the comedy industry. Back then, that was a complete joke that you could ever be a stand-up comedian or ever be on TV and make a living out of it. So I think from that point of view, there's business lessons, purpose, and then the other thing you learn in comedy is customer sympathy and empathy. There is no better lesson. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's so incredible to be a stand-up comedian standing in front of your customers who have paid you and get real-time feedback. I think about the hardest things that I've ever done in my life, and I've done some pretty tricky things, but nothing beats that time that I stood in front of the Plumbers Conference at Eden Park with me and two of my mates trying to do stand-up comedy and bombing badly, to the point where someone at the back just started slow clapping, and someone else stood up and I think we've had enough now, you can go. And it's just like, that's like customer responsiveness you've got to have in business.
You've given me a little gateway there for a nice seg, and the beauty of the long-form podcast is we can go in different directions. We're going to join back up to some more business chat, but there's an incredible story about cancer and beating the odds, and I'd just like you to pick it up from wherever you want and tell us about it.
It's like 30 years later. Well, actually, there's a little link there, because when I was running those two businesses and stressed out to the max, I actually got sick. I got fairly sick with what the doctor thought at the time was probably an ulcer, like a stomach ulcer. And that was a bit of a health wake-up call. It was like, shit, I can't do that. I'm 25 or 26 or 27 at the time, very young. We had a young baby. It was like clearly not good for my health. But anyway, I didn't learn that lesson at the time about being more responsive to your health until like when I was 30 years later, 25 years later, when I was just feeling a bit under the weather. I was at my work here in Auckland, and this is now I've got a grown-up proper job. I'm working for the government, but I was feeling really under the weather all the time, really tired a lot of the time, and Catherine said to me, you should really go and see a doctor and get a checkup, and men are not good at listening to our bodies or our wives, and we need to improve on both fronts. And that particular occasion, it took weeks and weeks, if not months, for me to finally go, yeah, I am sick. Like, it's not just run down, there's something going on. And Catherine actually booked me an appointment at the doctor, and I kind of had no choice, and I went into the doctor thinking I just had the flu or something, something minor. Catherine had been Googling all the symptoms of what I had, and she kept coming up with all these ideas. She said, oh, you've got Zika virus. And okay, no. Oh, you got pleurisy. Oh, no, it's early stage dementia. I don't know. She came up with all these cool theories of what it could be. And then finally I went to the doctor, and they did all these tests, and they couldn't work it out. But when they did a scan of my abdomen, the doctor said, I'm just going to do a scan. And that's when they discovered a massive tumour that I had. And then it all unfolded from there. It turned out that tumour was actually cancer. And it was just a crazy moment, a wake-up call moment. That basically they said, look, that's it. I said, I'm on my way to work. They said, you're not going to work. You have to get into treatment immediately. Like, this was a Friday. I had to be in treatment on Monday. You have no time to waste. So I had to call my boss and say, I won't be back in the office for I don't know how long. They said maybe 3 to 6 months. Turned out it was a lot longer than that, by the way. But you hear that whole cliche about your life change in an instant, and it really can. For me, I literally thought I was going to the doctor, they'd give me a couple of pills, I'd be at my 10 o'clock appointment, and that'd be it. And instead I'm going to the doctor, being referred to go to hospital, getting a scan, being told I've got cancer, and no time to waste. That's a real, mind fuck.
Yeah.
Can I say that, by the way?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. You can in this instance. All right, I want more. Because there's an incredible story here, right? Like, it's the next step is you learn it's a terminal diagnosis. And I'm interested. I've heard you speak about this before, so I hope it's all right to ask about. But actually getting inside the head of someone who's giving a terminal diagnosis and what your outlook on the world looks like and how you deal with it.
Yeah, well, to be fair, it wasn't initially terminal. It was like, initially, you've got this cancer, it's a massive tumour, it's quite a major problem. But if we give you the chemotherapy that we know we've got and you do everything we say, you probably be okay. And so that was the first few months of treatment was that kind of mindset of, okay, it's hard, physically and mentally hard, but I can get through this. And it was only when they realised that, I had this genetic mutation, which I'm not a mutant, by the way, but I had this particular gene profile which meant that the chemo was not going to work. That was A, and then B, every time they stopped the treatments, the tumours would start growing again, and so it was popping up all over the place. So those two things, after a while, made me go, hell, I've really got a problem. And then it did literally come to a point where the doctor sat us down as a family, and this is like 6 months into treatment. We had been through a hell of a lot of stuff. I'd been off work for all this time. I had been physically very ill because this chemotherapy is pretty nasty, very emotionally wrenching for everybody. And then to be sat down at the end of that and said, actually, it hasn't worked, and we have no more treatment options. We've run out. We've tried all of the different chemotherapies that we have in New Zealand. And that's when she said, basically, I think we should talk about what do you want to do with the time you have left in your life. Like, it was like, shit, are we having this conversation? And Catherine, I remember looking around, Catherine's having a little cry. The doctor's lovely. She's having a little cry. My brother's with us. John, our mate, was with us, I think, too, actually. And everyone was, like, quite emotional because we'd realised what had happened, like there's so much work had gone into it. Not just from me, like the whole whānau around us, that, friends, family, everybody. And I'm sitting there feeling like a little bit of a failure. I haven't talked about that before, but a little bit like, fuck, I've let you all down. Like, we should have been celebrating now. We should have been going out celebrating, and instead it hasn't worked. And it was just quite a it was a bit of a weird time. But at the same time, it was a moment of kind of resolve, of really like, man, I don't accept that. Catherine had said this comment to the boys, actually. We've got three boys. And she'd made a statement to them that I heard, which is that, the world's a really big place. And there's heaps of stuff that goes on in the world. And if anyone can find the answer to the problem, Dad can. And that was a great compliment to me. And no pressure, love, thanks. But it was true, because I didn't. We sort of just didn't accept that only because it wasn't available in New Zealand didn't mean that we couldn't find something. And that was the kind of moment of resolve.
And that's a lovely moment. But what's the reality of having the conversation and then going, now I'm going to get to work to do that?
Well, yeah, I mean, many people here will know this. Like sometimes that when you're feeling really, really, under stress or pressure, you have to make a decision to how you're going to react. And you may be not even consciously making that decision, but if you choose to be a victim of the situation and feel sorry for yourself and whatever, and I talk about this a lot when I do my talks and stuff, that will be a self-creating reality sometimes. Being a victim is a really tricky place to be. It's very natural and very normal, and you're allowed to do it for a while. But if you stay in that position of being a victim of your circumstance, it's not healthy. So when you make the decision that actually, okay, what can I do? What can I control? And I know this kind of sounds a bit cliche, but it's really true. For us, we were, okay, Kath and I, we went, right, we know there's clinical trials going on around the rest of the world. Let's work out what we can do. Let's reach out to all the people that have ever said that they could help us. So there was a moment of like, put ourselves back in the driving seat.
I asked John, your friend John, this question as well around, does a diagnosis like that change you? And he said, one, ask him because I wouldn't know. But two, his observation was it didn't necessarily change you, but it sharpened your focus.
Yeah.
Is that a okay way of
framing definitely. It? I mean, I think I've always been a very purpose-oriented person, but this has made me much, much more so. I mean, definitely in that period of time, I was very sharply focused on, finding a resolution to this terminal diagnosis. But even now, I think I'm still I think I'm focused. I mean, it might not look like that when you think how many things I do, but they're focused on something that I think is important.
And the response was wrapped around community, right?
Yeah.
Like your comedy friends put on a show and raise money and give a little pages.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of rallied around to help find the solution, which is why you're here today.
And that's when you realise the value of networks, the value of community. I mean, I just think about the people that work, and go through things like the Icehouse programs where you build these lifelong relationships. And at the time, it's transactional. You're having a couple of beers, but you start to form a bond with people. And what I realised is over the years of meeting and so many people and forming friendships in different communities and circles, that at the time when someone needs something, like that's when your community comes to help. And for me, really in a funny way, sadly, give a little was one of the answers. And it's terrible. It was the most embarrassing and humbling and awful thing that I've ever had to do, is accept literally people giving me money. It wasn't that we were like poor. It was just more that we didn't have the money to pay for this. We had mortgages and it was $1 million was the bill that they had told us at the hospital in Boston. I'll come back to about why we got there. And it was just not possible. It was impossible. And that's when you just go, I have to accept help. But on the other hand, it's exhilarating and amazing that you realise that you've got all these people around you that will swing into action for you. Yeah.
Now, we've all received unsolicited LinkedIn messages before. Yours is a pretty amazing one that you picked up. But where's the timeline in this from the diagnosis that it's terminal to ping?
Pretty much the same. So I mentioned earlier there were 2 times in my life where I felt like there was a really pivotal moment. One was when I got a phone call out of the blue to see if I wanted to work on TV. The second one was this. So when I was sick, I started writing a column on stuff because I was bored shitless, and I also wanted attention because I'm very needy. And I just wanted to write about it. I'm a comedian. I like writing. I was writing little jokes about what it's like having cancer. I thought it was all going to end well, so therefore it was just going to be a fun thing to do while I was sick. But it actually became quite a lifeline moment, writing these columns which went out every week on stuff. And when you write them in real time, they're like sometimes very bleak and sometimes, amazing and sometimes very ambiguous. So you're writing in real time. You don't know what the outcome's going to be. So I was writing these columns and people were sharing them all around the world and reading them. And And it was, as I say, it wasn't just New Zealand, because it was a patient's voice, which doctors don't hear that often and researchers don't hear that often, what patients are actually thinking and feeling. And I think it was quite raw at times. And one of those people reached out to me a few months into me being sick, actually, and I had never heard of the guy, Mike, his name is. He had read my column. He lives in America. After a few months of reading the column, he decided to just send me a note and wish me well, because I knew there was a particular procedure coming up. And he sent me this note, beautiful note. David, you don't know me. I live on the other side of the world. Through your writing, I've come to know all about you and come to know you as a person. And it just goes on. And at the bottom, he says, if there's anything I can ever do to help you, let me know. And that was just a beautiful message. At that time, that was maybe like halfway through my treatment, so it was just a lovely thing to have received. And I got a few things like that. But then literally, and this is where the spooky universe happens, we'd had this protocol with my doctor, this sort of agreement that if things, went wrong, we should just be honest with each other. And so I'd just done this test, and this was when I was still going through my chemotherapy. I knew there was a big procedure coming up called a stem cell transplant. And I did all the pre-tests. They do lung function, and liver function, and brain. It's like, because it's a major deal for patients. And the last thing they did was a PET scan, which is where they check if there's any sign of cancer, because if there is, it's not good. Anyway, I got a text message from my doctor like at 10 o'clock in the morning on the Friday going, we need to talk. Can you come in for a meeting today? And it's like, shit, that's not good. That's when I called Catherine and my brother and my friend, and we went into the doctor. Literally, we were on the way to see the doctor, and we're sitting in the car, it's a pretty emotional time, and I looked at my phone, and there was a message from Mike, who just said, hey, I know you've got your thing on Monday, I just thought I'd, wish you well. So the universe had spoken. And I replied to him going, I've just had this message from the doctor, I don't think it's going well. I think if anything you can do to help us, please let me know now. And we went into the doctor. That's when we got this diagnosis, terminal cancer. We have to stop the treatment. It's all gone horribly wrong. By the time we got out, or the next morning, Mike had sent back a message going, I've talked to a few people. One of them wants to talk to you today. This is a Saturday or Sunday or something. And it was just this incredible series of luck. And that person happened to be a researcher and a cancer researcher on the type of cancer I had, with a treatment that we don't have in New Zealand. And he thought I could be a candidate for the trial. And it was just this, again, this amazing moment that you don't get often in life, that this opportunity presents itself. So we jumped on it.
So you jumped on it. You went to Boston. You got the treatment.
Yeah, small matter of having to raise a shit ton of money, but yes.
Raise $1 million. You went over there and you come back.
Yeah.
And it works.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that mindset.
It usually gets a round of applause, but okay.
And it works. And it works.
I don't need your pity.
I'm interested in the mindset shift. What were the stats? 5% chance of lasting 12 months?
Yeah. And we know that because the doctor had to write a little letter to the insurance company and stuff like that. It was like really, we had to write it all down, had to get a second opinion. Yeah, it was really in your face at that time.
And so when it clears, and when you're in the clear, what's your outlook on life? Like, has it changed you? What do you look at your family and the world differently?
Yeah, I have to tell you the little story, by the way, of how he told me this, because I tend to like meeting people. So the doctor in America is amazing, Jeff. American hospital system, diabolical, expensive, horrible, but the people, incredible, just like ours for different reasons, And he was amazing, and I got to know him. I was up there. I ended up being up there for about 3.5, 4 months. Got to know him really well. He was my doctor. He gave me this treatment, and we were monitoring me. So you sort of form this quite bond. He's about my age, maybe a bit younger. And when I was going in to get my final results, like that day, Catherine wasn't with me. She'd been up for quite a lot of that time, but because of the kids, she had to be back in New Zealand. So he walks in, and he just had the biggest smile on his face, and he just said, because obviously he knows me, he said, I'll talk and you listen. And then he said, it's all fantastic. It's the best possible outcome. There's no sign of cancer. And then I said, can we call Catherine? And he went, yeah. And I started put her on FaceTime, and I said, okay, but Jeff, put a really sad face on. Like, let's have a bit of a joke. And he just goes, no, I'm not, because not doing that. It was so funny. Anyway, it was just a special moment. And Yeah, I mean that was incredible, because this treatment that I went through, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, CAR T-cell therapy, it's like a miracle treatment. It takes about 28 to 30 days from being terminal to being completely clear of cancer, no sign of it left. Like, it's just amazing. So it is like another one of those light switch moments where you had one reality and then suddenly you've got a different reality. And I remember, he gave me that news. It was really lovely. It was about 4:00 in the afternoon. I remember it really vividly. At the end of him saying, "You are now cured," like, we're not cured. He said, "You are now in remission. There's no sign of cancer." And I said, "What do I do now?" Because I'd just spent the last year and a half of my life being told what to do by doctors. It's actually quite weird as a patient to suddenly not be being told what to do. And he just said, "I don't care." And I said, "Then shall we go to the pub?" And he went, "Okay." And so we went to the pub together, me and him, and it was so cool. And then, so very non-American, by the way, to ask a doctor that. Anyway, but then I jump on a plane the next day to fly back to New Zealand, and I just had this. I did have this little moment of like, wow, that's incredible. And I stopped over in, because it was in Boston, I stopped over in San Francisco on the way back, and I actually popped in to see a friend of mine who lives in San Francisco, who's a leadership coach, Ben. And he coaches all the big tech companies and stuff. And I went and saw him, and I told him, what had just happened in my life. And we just had this amazing sort of hour with him, just kind of gently talking to me about life and giving me a book to read called Man's Search for Meaning, which is like a super amazing book. And then we just had this amazing chat. And then another cool thing happened. I went to the airport, and the bloody Koru Club was full, and I was in the back of the plane, and another mate of mine just walks past, Greg, and he saw me and he went, "Oh, come into the club." And I went, "Oh, they're full." And he said, "What are you up here for?" And I told him, and he just sat with me for 4 hours then, and we just chatted, just him and I, and just this amazing sense of community and purpose. But then when I came back, I landed back in New Zealand. We had a great celebration with the family, of course, and the kids, and just everything is lovely. My boss at work, who's amazing at the time, just said, "Look, don't rush coming back to work. Just take some time. You're going to need some time off." So I took a few weeks off, a couple of weeks, and then I went back to the office thinking, "Okay, cool, I'm back to my normal life." And one of the things that Ben had told me, which was really valuable, he said, "You're probably going to suffer from some sort of post-traumatic stress thing. You've just had 18 months of the most stressful thing that can ever happen. You've had this amazing, incredible diagnosis, incredible result. You're going to get post-traumatic stress." And it was a really amazing observation, because I went back to my office, and then after literally about a day, I went, "Oh shit, I shouldn't be here. Like, this is wrong for me to be trying to pretend I'm back doing the old things I used to do." And also quite hard on the family for me just to pretend that life has come back to normal. Hard on the kids, like nothing had happened. So we went through as a family actually quite a bit of post-traumatic stress actually after that we had to adjust to this new way of being, and I had to really realize that I had to protect my family more than I had probably thought I had to. When you are a patient, you're busy being treated. It's actually, for you, it's one reality, but it's harder, I think, much, much harder for the support people around you who are having to try and look after you and try and keep normality for the family and the children. And so me just going back to work again was just like the wrong thing to do. It was like an insult to Catherine and the kids that had been through so much. So that took me some adjusting, I have to say.
You're such a good speaker on this. I wonder, is it really important to you to communicate with others that are going through cancer? And like, how do you communicate? Does it take a lot out of you being in that world?
Yeah, well, I will answer that question, but just to kind of go towards that book that Ben gave me it's called Man's Search for Meaning. If you ever get a chance to read it, it's a powerful, powerful book. It's written by a guy that went through the concentration camps during the war, and then afterwards wrote about that experience and what a incredible change in perspective it had given him on life. And I don't equate my circumstances with his, don't get me wrong. But the stress, the idea of going through this profoundly life-changing event was really important. And in that book, it talks about the power of having a purpose and of finding your life's purpose. And I know that sounds a bit woo-woo, but the reality is actually many of us are on that journey, and some of us find it through religion or whatever. For me, like going through life-changing, experience of cancer was that moment, and I found myself not having that sense of purpose. I didn't know what the fuck was all that about, and And then I got this phone call from the Malaghan Institute in Wellington, who's an amazing cancer research institute. They'd read about me 2 or 3 weeks after I got back. They called me and said, we'd love you to come and see what we're doing. And I went down there and met with them and discovered that they're doing the same sort of cancer therapy in there. But then so that was amazing. We can talk about more about that. But the other amazing thing that happened was patients started reaching out to me because I had been so visible. Like, even now, if you search cancer in New Zealand, like, I'll be probably one of the top of the list. I put, poster child for cancer, just what everyone dreams of. But because of that, I get messages all the time, like constantly. And back then it was just like, text messages or DMs or whatever from other people going, how can I get what you had? And and so that was like really profoundly difficult at the time. I had to work out how the hell I dealt with it. Like, I still now get 2 or 3 a week, patients reaching out to me. But I've probably got more skills now about how to deal with it than I did back then.
This is a bit of a shitty question, but do you have or have you had survivor's guilt?
Yes. Guilt's a weird word, eh? I try not to say guilt because guilt. There's definitely this awareness that I've had an outcome that is actually pretty special. And at that time, 8 years ago, this is now 8 years ago. At that time, very unusual. Nowadays, luckily, and I hope we talk about this, but nowadays there's much, much more hope for people who have this illness. But back then, I knew so many people who didn't get that outcome. And as I say, I came back and patients were calling me, and I remember at least 3 or 4 of them that I met, Catherine and I met actually, and we'd go to their house and we were talking to them, and they'd had the same treatment as me, or the same chemo problems, and we're trying to get them on the clinical trial that I went on. One of them did go on it, and it didn't work. Another one couldn't get there because he couldn't get the money, and they basically passed away. And in that first year after I came back from my treatment, I think I went to about 10 or 12 funerals of people I had met. And since then, it's quite a lot more. So that's the guilt or the sense of responsibility or the sense of kind of, shit, why did I get that little, A, the opportunity, and B, the perfect outcome? And this great guy over here didn't get it. And how can we make sure that the next person can get it? That's the. So I use it to power myself, and that was the thing. I asked a doctor actually one day. I was like, "How the hell do you sit with people, and you know that they're not going to make it?" And he said that I use that to help me go again.
And how can we avoid that? How can we have more stories like yours?
Oh well, jeepers, we're in this, and in New Zealand, just. We are a wonderful country, and we have a great health system, or health people in the health system. But to be honest, we're in disarray at the moment, the health system here. And I did that. This was 8 years ago that I did my treatment. And when I came back, I discovered there's this cancer research institute in Wellington doing the same type of research for the same type of stuff that I did. And I thought, great, that means they'll quickly get it into the market. And we'll quickly have it here. And of course, it makes a lot of sense for the health systems to adopt it. 8 years later, we are still battling away. It's not a medical problem anymore. The medical sort of side of it is relatively proven. It's now like, can we get through the bureaucracy? Can we fund this? How do we get access for everybody? How do we make it equitable? And we're funding this. We're doing a clinical trial for the Malaghan Institute. And we're doing it with philanthropy. Oh my God! Like we're funding life-changing cancer research for 60 patients in New Zealand with philanthropy. I find that appalling in some ways and really disappointing. And so that for me, I help them out raising the money, and I help them out by talking about what they're doing and that sort of thing. But the actual patient side of it is the tough bit when you're talking to patients who could get treatment, for whom it probably would work, but we just don't have it here yet.
I'm going to lead us back to business, but is there anything else? You mentioned a few times you hope that we talked about it. What else? What other messages would you like to get out?
Just the 30-second version of CAR T-cell therapy, for those who haven't heard of it. It's mainly for blood cancers at the moment, but actually there's clinical trials globally for other types of cancer. And it's the idea of working with the immune system. And this is not woo-woo, go to Mexico and get vitamin shots in your bum or whatever. This is real science at Harvard Medical School, where I got my treatment. The Malaghan Institute is equally as advanced. And basically, it's retraining your immune system, your T cells, which are part of all of our immune system, through genetic modification. So it's a gene editing treatment. And it helps your T cells, your immune system, recognize cancer. So unlike other treatments that try and kill cancer, it just helps your immune system to do its job better. So it's very elegant, it's very beautiful in its composition, and it's proving to be incredibly effective. You know, terminal patients like me getting complete remission or cure like I've got.
I want to lead you back to New Zealand and New Zealand's story. And all of the jobs I listed at the start, huge experience in global business. The question is, what made you want to tell New Zealand's story?
Surely the real question is, how does a washed-up bum comedian get a job? Yeah.
Lead us there.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it was interesting because that was actually... so I tell the story of New Zealand. My job is, it's a government agency or government-funded agency. Our job is to help the rest of the world understand more about New Zealand by telling our stories, by creating a brand for New Zealand, by building our reputation as a country, which all sounds a bit vague and woo-woo, but it's sort of marketing, basically, marketing the country to the world. And the reason I do that is because before that I spent about 10 or 12 years in trade, international trade, with NZTE, and before that with Microsoft in Asia. So I got to kind of know international business and how important it is, how reputation is such an important part of doing business. And this is applicable for anybody. You know, you can sell a widget, but actually it's who you are as a person, what you stand for as a company, what does your brand mean, how do you leave the impression in the minds of your customers and consumers. That's critical to getting value. And so, yeah, our job at New Zealand Story is to basically do that on behalf of the country.
Is there anything unique about New Zealand business that is
Yep.
different to the world that you've seen given your overseas experience?
Yeah, we do. I think we have a very... our New Zealand is... And again, New Zealanders don't always realise how special some of these things are. An incredibly trustworthy business environment. Like we are, and you hear these measures, you probably hear them in the news and stuff, we are, the easiest place in the world to do business, lowest corruption, highest transparency, high peacefulness, gender equity, and all that stuff. You hear them so regularly as Kiwis that they a bit wash over us. But boy, oh boy, the combination of that is so special as a country. We are known as being this highly reputable, easy place to do business where you can trust people. That's number one. Number two is our bicultural roots and our multicultural society. And again, we don't always value it in New Zealand as much as some of the rest of the world. When one of the most important things we can tell the rest of the world about New Zealand is that we have multiple cultures here, that we speak multiple languages, that we are accepting of all cultures. That's really attractive for international business. Not that we're just a little tiny version of England. And then the care. In our model, we talk about the care for the environment and care for people as being unique factors for New Zealand, and the combination of all these things. The concept of kaitiakitanga and manaakitanga, Māori concepts that resonate really well with the rest of the world because those words are packed with so much meaning. People love hearing about kaitiakitanga. Like last week, as I said, we had this delegation from Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia is 100 times our size of our GDP, whatever. This was the senior minister and a whole lot of the head of their sovereign wealth fund, many big business leaders, and I was briefing them on kaitiakitanga, and they just loved it. Like they said, this resonates so well for us. This is exactly the way that we think about it, the Arabs think about the world. It's not the Western way of thinking about the world. It's bringing ancient wisdom and marrying that together with kind of Western ways of doing business. That's the power, and that's where we've got in New Zealand, I think.
Because a lot of, particularly my generation, we were raised on that number 8 wire innovation.
I know a good book about that. Yep.
Where does that stand in your opinion these days?
Oh, it's a huge thing. This is why New Zealand is a nation of small and medium businesses. I'm looking at Olivia now. 96 or 97% of businesses in New Zealand are small and medium. This is why I love the Icehouse, because we are serving this incredible part of the market. New Zealand is easy to set up a business. I know it's news to all of you. Not easy to run a business. It's just easy to set it up. Like it's, $35 on the website for half an hour. But in some ways that's a good thing. In some ways that's a bad thing. So, and New Zealand is bred. It's in our DNA and it's multi-generational of we are self-reliant. We have low power, distance hierarchy issues. We challenge authority. We are multi-skilled. All these are beautiful aspects of New Zealanders and New Zealand businesses. And that number 8 wire kind of captures all of that. It's the idea that you can fix something out of nothing and you can turn your mind to anything. And that's why I think we have 96% of our businesses are small and medium. The challenge is when you want to go bigger and higher and go international, and some of that mindset actually gets in the way. And that's the sort of thing that sometimes businesses need help kind of crossing the chasm on.
What do you mean by that?
Because if you're a founder in a business and you have basically set it up from scratch yourself, or you've inherited it with your dad or whatever, and you've learned all the bits of the business and you've fallen in love with your own products, you probably don't have the skills of all of the disciplines as the business get bigger. You might not know quite what marketing does. You might not really value sort of customer service stuff as much. And so that sometimes as a business, you need to learn the other aspects of business and value them as much. And the programs, for example, that the Icehouse does, that's a lot of it is like opening people's eyes to what other things they might need, what other help they should accept, and then how do they build and grow from there.
We've taken the audience on a bit of a journey tonight. I do want to sort of speak to them a little bit. For those listening on the Between Two Beers podcast, this is at the Icehouse, a bunch of sort of small and medium business owners. What is the message out there for those that are doing it tough or they're doing it well? Like, is there a message that you want to get out?
Yeah. People like me are in great admiration. I am in great admiration, as many of the board members, many of the directing team, the staff of the Icehouse, of the tenacity and the risk-taking in a good way, and just the sheer skills of small business owners. And small, by the way, is not a pejorative word. It could be, you could have 100 million, revenue and still be a small business in the world. But it takes such, guts and such tenacity to keep going. And as I say, I had my experience running a couple of small businesses years ago, and that has just been seared into my brain about that experience. And to see the sorts of companies that come through the Icehouse, for example, and the effort that they put in, the fact that they are supporting their communities, hiring a bunch of people, the measure of success is not always just profit. It's how do I contribute to my community? How do I create, meaningful jobs for people? That's such a critical part of New Zealand's economy. And I think it sometimes gets left behind, we forget about it. It's tough at the moment. And I don't think that small business is getting the support that it should. One of the things I do is chair the Small Business Advisory Group for the Minister, along with Olivia and Deb and a few other people in the room. And basically, we're giving the ministry and the government advice on what small business needs. And the number one bit of advice is move faster. It's great to have big long-term policies and all these sort of things, but actually business needs help sometimes. And it doesn't need handouts always, but it needs the settings to be right. It needs the government. We need to know the government is listening to us and reacting. And I just think, right now, in the recession that we've been in, I think things are getting brighter. We're going to talk about it at the Ignite conference. But I think things are getting brighter, but at the same time, it's tough. And so, we've got to focus forward.
You're advising the minister on one hand. I'm going to hijack this a little bit. What sort of advice would you give to a couple of plucky small business owners?
Do you know some?
Just a couple. On some very specific areas, but one would be
learn Excel.
Yeah. One would be a P&L, and the other like avoiding burnout or like your busyness.
Yeah.
I think you might view as a superpower, but some of us might feel like we're drowning in some of the stuff that we got to do. So, from your position, what would you suggest?
I mean, I'd always check the basics. Yeah, have you got your physical health decent? Are you getting enough? I know this sounds really, really basic. Are you getting enough sleep? Have you sorted out your relationships? Have you got a strong platform? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'm sure it's been well debunked, but as a model, it's quite a good model to think about. You've got to have a strong platform. I often think about that in my life as I'm standing on a strong platform. I've got a wife that I love and loves me. I've got a great family, good set of friends. Where that side of my life is sorted. So, okay, that means I've got the mental and emotional energy to spend in some other areas. So if you haven't got that, it's going to be tough. Learn, continuous learning I think is important. Like business owners almost mythologize the myth of the lone entrepreneur, the guy in the shed or the woman in the shed creating something and then turning that into amazing. And we celebrate those people, and we should because they're amazing, but they're the unicorns. They're not the norm. So good businesses will realize that they're not good at something and reach out for help. That might be technical help. How do I do cash flow management? Or it might be emotional help. Jeepers, I'm really struggling at the moment, So find your cohort of people that you can lean into in that sense. I think that's the other big advice I'd have. And then stay positive. Like there's I'm an optimist. I've always been an optimist, but I genuinely think if you practice optimism, you get good at it. If you practice pessimism, you also get good at that. So be careful what you practice. But you've got to be relentless. You've got to be sometimes unreasonable. Like the people in this room that we're talking to are, by definition, unreasonable people. Because if they were safe people, they would have gone off and just worked for someone else and taken a safe job at the bank or the insurance company. They have chosen to set up a business. So they have that mental mindset of pushing and growing and stuff. And I think that, we've got to support people like that.
I've been given the cue from the back of the room that it's time to wrap up and let all these small business owners catch up with each other for a beer. I'm going to give you the last word, but then after that, I'm going to say, David Down, thank you for joining us on Between Two Beers Live. And I want everyone to go crazy because it's going to make an awesome social media clip, all right? So, David,
we're only doing it for the social media.
Have you got any last words, Dave, before we wrap this up?
Oh, look, it's a word of thanks to the people from who support the Icehouse. Like, many of us who are here for the cause, the purpose of the Icehouse, and we know we're not perfect, but we're trying really hard. It's tough for us as well as a business, just being honest. But things are going. We're turning a corner as well. But I think that the fact that we have the trust of 1,000 companies over the last 20-something years, the people in the room tonight, we've got hundreds of people tomorrow that are going to come to this event. That's an incredible, it's motivating for us because we do this because we think that we can make a difference and we're not brave enough to set up our own businesses anymore, or our wife won't let us. So look, yes, thank you. And you too, you guys, I couldn't, they showed some stats earlier about how well the Between Two Beers podcast is going. You guys are fantastic. New Zealand can't predict what businesses are going to be successful and we shouldn't try. But when you see something that's going well, you should give it hundies.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for David Downs live.